Well, good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to another of our Wednesday webinars. It's great to have you on board today. Got a great program today, kind of a unique program for us in the small business realm of things, talking about small nonprofits. I'm Kelly Bearden. I'm the director of the CSU Bakersfield Small Business Development Center, and I'll moderate your webinar today. I am actually up in Mono County with many of our small businesses in Mono County this week. So I will be joining you remote at our home office in Bakersfield. We have Elizabeth Hamlin producing. So we should have a really good webinar for you. We're really excited about the webinar we have today. And a little bit about the SBDC program is the SBDC program is in all 50 states. There are 1,000 centers across the country. It is funded by the U.S. Small Business Administration, and you'll find a small business development center anywhere in the United States. Locally, we're part of the Central California region, which is the central part of the state of California. We're one of six center regions in California. Our centers range from Kern to the south, to Mono in the north, Inyo in the east, and to the Pacific Ocean. And if you need any assistance, here is how you can find out in just a second. A little bit about today's webinar. Please ask questions. We really enjoy your feedback and your questions. You'll have the opportunity if you look at the bottom of your screen, and feel free to use the chat to ask questions. All of our attendees today are muted, and we have a survey that will be emailed shortly after the end at the conclusion of today's webinar. Surveys are important to us at the SBDC. This is another one of our surveys that we try to figure out what exactly you would like in future webinars. This is around I would guess, our 85th webinar that we've done since 2013, and we're always looking for innovative and creative topics such as we have today. Another thing on surveys is if you're a client of the Small Business Development Center, you'll notice that you receive quite a few surveys, and we have another one coming out on June 14th. Please respond. Handouts, a lot of people like handouts. Please mention that on the survey, and we can get that information to you. As far as some of the other webinar tips for you today, there's a mobile application available, and you can actually use it on any smartphone or tablet. For the best experience, download the Zoom software and watch it on a PC, laptop, or Mac. We're going to have some interactive polls today. It gives you the opportunity for us to know a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the direction where you would like to take your small nonprofit. So please participate in the interactive polls that Elizabeth will lead coming up shortly. And again, just a little bit of the questions are real beneficial. So for those of you that don't know, what we do at the SBDC is provide high quality, no cost, confidential one-on-one consulting. We're your business advisors, your business consultants, and your business coaches at a very nominal fee, $0. So please take us up on that opportunity. You can sign up for your local center in your region. Ours is located down below at the very bottom. In addition to the consulting that we provide, we do training for a number of small business owners. We do it in different means and methods. This is obviously an online training. Many of our centers host workshops and seminars and classes, so look at those. They're also provided either free or at a very low fee. So today, before we get on with our presenter today, Elizabeth is going to launch and do a couple of polls for us. So Elizabeth, on with the polls.
Thank you, Kelly. So our first poll is going to be a true or false. Oops. There we go. It is about having a strategic plan will help our organization raise more money. Do you think that is true or false? We've got a lot of results coming in right now. Looks like most of us are feeling like this is a true statement. Awesome. All right, I'm going to end the poll in just a moment. Cast your votes. Cool. So we have 100% feeling that this is true. That's Awesome. Okay, so on to our next poll regarding which of the following is typically the biggest problem that small nonprofits face regarding strategic planning? Is it not sure how to create a plan, poor execution of the plan, getting the board's buy-in? So, oh yeah, mixed results. There's, oh, got a couple more votes coming in. I'll give it a second or more. All right, so it looks like the winner is 59% believe poor execution of the plan is the biggest problem regarding strategic planning, and followed by not sure how to create a plan at 23% and getting the board to buy-in at 18%. So on to our last. This is a cool question. It's kind of like a fill in the blank, but we want to know the essence of strategy is choosing blank. This is a quote by Michael Porter. We have a few options there. So the essence of strategy is choosing what to do now. The essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. And the essence of strategy is choosing how to get there. Okay. Some mixed results. And I'm sure that Eric's going to get into this more a little later on. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So 82% of us felt that the essence of strategy is choosing how to get there, whereas it was a tie between what to do now and what not to do. And so
it's a great lead-in.
Great lead-in, awesome. So
yeah, great. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I guess those in attendance today pretty much aced that pop quiz. So it's my pleasure to introduce Eric Ryan. And, you can read on the screen and see, and you probably read a little bit about Eric, but let me just tell you a little bit what I know about Eric Ryan. I've met Eric about 6 years ago, and he did strategic planning for the central region of the California SBDC program. And also he's responsible for our CSUB SBDC strategic planning process. And Eric has been a real valuable asset. Brings some incredible tools and has really transformed what I thought about strategic planning. Strategic planning used to be, to me, an opportunity to where we would get away and I would fall a couple of days farther behind work. And that is how I viewed it. But now it is a real viable and moving and living document that the SBDC depends on. And I attribute that to the leadership that Eric Ryan has provided in strategic planning. I shared with Eric before that I'd love to see in the question on execution, because I truly believe that football coaches have the greatest quotes of all time. And it reminds me every time I see the word execution about John McKay, who had a 0-26 Tampa Bay Buccaneer team and was asked at the press conference following a football game on what he felt about his team's execution. And he replied, personally, I'm in favor of it. So with that, let me turn it over. Thank you, Eric Ryan, for joining us. Have a great webinar. Get your questions to Elizabeth. She will handle them afterwards. And take it away, Eric.
Fantastic, Kelly. Well, I hope all of you, if you haven't met Kelly face-to-face, it's a treat when you do. Great personality, engaging, and a real strength to the Central California region for the Small Business Network. And I didn't know that I was responsible for your strategic planning at your center, Kelly. I knew I had a hand in it, but I got to raise my game for you. So, so thank you so much for those of you that are on the line here. I have a presentation that I genuinely hope provide you with some good ideas. That the theme here is secrets, quote unquote. They're basically practical tips and guidance for you and your nonprofit, specifically around strategic planning. And I'm just going to go ahead and launch right into this. Hello. I'd like to just share a little bit about me and my work, and then get into the topic itself. I've run my business for 21 years, training and consulting. You can learn more at nonprofit.Com. Our entire focus, we're unique in this way, our entire focus is strategic planning for small organizations. We've done other things over the years, but over several years ago, we just focused in on this topic itself. Our approach is we try to be as much as possible very practical, because our clients are small organizations, a lot on their plate. So we try to make it very practical and useful, and how we approach strategic planning is not a very theoretical or academic exercise. Sometimes what I tell people, Kelly was just referencing, the NFL, and, football at, peewee level, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, and football at, 25-year-olds in the NFL, it's all football. But those are still completely different types of approaches to football. And the same thing with strategic planning. Strategic planning in a large organization is a completely different beast than what you have at a small organization. And we typically find that the more practical, the better. On a personal basis, I live in the Bay Area. Married, have a couple of wacko kids. You can see a picture of them there. I'm pretty blessed with all of that. A partial client list is here on the screen. Regardless of the details here, we serve clients from a variety of sectors in the nonprofit space. We don't focus on any one vertical whatsoever. And you can learn more if you go to the website about the clients we serve. So we have a foundational premise that we came up with. This is what drives us, and it's this idea. When I say we and us, I'm talking about our business. That implementing an effective strategic planning process will transform your organization. Kelly referenced the transformation they've undergone. Underlined and italicized here, effective. Frankly, the opposite is true. Implementing a crummy strategic planning process can also transform your organization in the opposite direction. But this is what gets us up in the morning, and we love working with mission-driven organizations. And helping them to get to close the gap between where they are and where they need to be to hit their mission. Implementing that process benefits the organization in all sorts of ways. Typical ways are the funding streams become more stable and stronger, programs become more focused and effective, boards become stronger, and you also have less turnover, etc. There's just a variety of things that when you and your organization do the strategic planning process more effectively, then you get tremendous benefits, and it's why we focus on that. We know that the lever of strategic planning impacts all elements of the organization. That said, well, I'll hit to that said in just a moment. Some examples of those transformations. There's 3 organizations I'm listing here real quickly. Vida Verde Nature Education is a nonprofit south of San Francisco that engaged in the secrets and the tips that I'm sharing with you. They've tripled their revenue over 5 years, transformed their board, grew their staff, became a best-in-class nonprofit. The Good Shepherd Grace Center is a drug and alcohol treatment center in San Francisco. Been working with them for a while. Their revenue streams have diversified and increased by 20%. Established a common vision and focus of programs. Their board of directors has grown and become more professional. And then the network that Kelly referenced earlier, the small business network throughout Central California, we've been able to help integrate a new technology program across the entire region, strengthening the teamwork of the virtual team of leaders, including Kelly, and increasing the funding stability and community outreach. So I'm going through these rather quickly, but the key word here is there's a transformation when people really take this seriously. And there's other examples I could provide, but there's this sort of process becomes an operational DNA of an organization when you're doing strategic planning effectively. However, and this is what I was going to say just a moment ago, what gets in the way? What gets in the way of effective strategic planning at small organizations? I want to share this point, and frankly, it was one of the questions that you all, frankly, answered correctly. It was the second poll question. What I like to say sometimes when I'm talking about strategic planning is sometimes viewed in the same way that you view New Year's resolutions. It's 11:55, December 31st, you create a New Year's resolution, and then by January 2nd, it's out the window. And it's become a joke. Here's a cartoon here. I can't believe it's been a year since I didn't become a better person. Or here's a couple of cats on a treadmill, their New Year's resolution. Or here's a good one. the New Year's resolution from 2009, 2010, 2011, and so on, lose weight, start dating. You could say this was a strategic plan for 2009, 2010. It's raise money, grow the board, etc. Strategic planning, especially at small nonprofits, the number one challenge that we've experienced, there's other challenges too, and we listed them there, you know, getting the board involved, knowing how to create a plan, etc. Those are definitely issues, but what we found is that the number one issue is actually implementing and engaging and executing the plan once it is created. So this is the primary challenge most small organizations face. There's lots of resources to create a plan, but once you've created a plan, it's this execution of it. And so we've built our entire model around serving our clients around the idea of how can we help them execute the plan more effectively. So this is a fundamental concept, and it's what drives our entire model. Said another way, and this is just some research from the TCC group that studied the Packard Foundation's grant building, is that the biggest challenge that they find for nonprofits with capacity building the capacity is often implementing those strategies. So it's the same thing, just said slightly differently. So the rest of the webinar is going to provide you with those secrets or guidance and tips for how you and your nonprofit can overcome this core challenge and succeed at strategic planning. So secret number one. Be a strategic planning champion and make it a part of your job. Now, what you'll probably find with these 5 secrets or tips is these may not seem super new to you perhaps, but I'm trying to bring the best of the best. That what I've found, if you do these 5 things, you're going to have a heck of a lot better of succeeding at helping your organization transform than not doing these things. These are the fundamental pieces, and those 3 organizations I referenced earlier have done these. So, so let me explain this particular secret or tip in a little bit more detail. What often happens, as you all probably know, at small organizations, is that the leaders are barely hanging on. This could be the executive director, the board chair, other staff members. They're responsible for leading the fundraising effort, ensuring the quality programming, managing staff, reviewing, creating budgets, promoting mission vision, developing the board, network with the community, and lead strategic planning. Despite the best intentions, that strategic planning is an important but not very urgent exercise, and all of the different urgencies that face you very easily help you to push your implementation of these bigger strategic planning topics to the side. It's very common, and it is where people start to get disillusioned with the process. So how do you make it a part of your job? Well, basically keeping those benefits top of mind. If you have a really clear why for why you're doing it, so that those benefits that I listed before in terms of those, you know, how you get the funding and so on. But here's a list that also sort of highlights it: the fundraising benefits, developing and growing the board, strengthening the organizational effectiveness, strengthening the focus of your programs, effectiveness of your staff, operational efficiency. If you keep these types of benefits in mind, that's going to give you more motivation to stay true to the strategic planning process when you have all that other chaos going on around you. So this is a key strategy. Another piece that you may want to lean on, if those pieces don't motivate you enough, there's some research that shows that the high success organizations rely on strategic planning to a large or critical degree of their success, 65% of them. And if you add in the other 28%, you're over 90% of the organizations that benefit from having success are looking at the strategic planning's impact on that process. If you want some more motivation, fundraising is critical for you. Most nonprofits, of course, that organizations that concentrate on fund development capacity alone don't get as much fundraising benefit unless they integrate that with strategic planning. So there's all sorts of things for you to keep in mind to motivate you and help this become a part of your job. And if you have that momentum and that motivation as a leader of the organization, that's going to filter over into others. So that's sort of the spirit of it. Something a little more tangible is creating some accountability. Make sure everybody in the organization, assuming that you're a leader of the organization in some fashion, knows that this is a part of your job, that we as an organization are committed to that, and this is a part of your job and role. And thirdly, another sort of mechanical piece is, you know, if it's not on the calendar, oftentimes it doesn't happen. So with your strategic plan, with the process, assuming that you have one, if you're going to champion the process and really make it effective and make it a part of your job, then get the calendar out and block out chunks of time where it's sacred time, and all your team members know this is when you're working on the strategic plan itself, focusing on it, and doing some of the elements of the strategic plan. So I lead with this as the #1 secret, because there's not a single organization that I've seen yet that has succeeded unless there was a leader or a champion of the process within the organization. Unless that person makes it a part of their job in some fashion, then this stuff just falls by the wayside. It's like so many things around leadership and management out there, like that it really requires someone or someones to take the leadership. So there's very deliberate why this is the #1 piece here. So again, these are all the secrets and tips that are going to help you to really catalyze and execute the strategic planning at your organization. Second piece, this is a mindset. And this is on purpose put #2 also. Approach strategic planning. This is what Kelly referenced earlier, and I didn't bait him with this. He said this just on his own, that approach strategic planning as a step-by-step, never-ending process, not a one-time event. And I think that's what Kelly was referencing earlier in the introduction. Oftentimes planning is viewed as an event, and it's usually like as Kelly referenced, where you go off for a day or two and you create a plan and so on, and maybe for a few weeks there's some strengthening of the organization because there's some motivation, but over time, weeks, months, the benefit to the organization starts to fade and can even hurt the organization, because what happened is we took all these people away for a retreat, or we created this plan, put all this energy in, and the focus is being, the mindset was that planning was an event. We created a plan, at a retreat, or we just created a plan. And that starts to cause all sorts of problems for the organization if you approach it that way. So the opposite of that is to approach strategic planning as an ongoing process. We utilize a 4-step process. It's called the CAPE method. So if you like this method, great. If you don't like this method, great. The point is you should be thinking about how you approach strategic planning as an ongoing process. Our 4-part method is, step 1, find and identify someone to champion it. That was the tip I just gave you a moment ago, that secret. Conduct some form of an organizational assessment, create a plan, and then execute like mad. And there's no, it's pretty obvious here that the majority of this overall process is around the execution of it. And then with that execution, you learn and integrate back into your assessment and create a plan. But this is an ongoing cycle. We happen to call it the CAPE method because it's strategic planning, and you got to find things that are a little cheeky and trying to remember stuff. So we tell our clients that once you've done this, you've earned your CAPE and you get superpowers and are a super nonprofit. A little cheeky, but we're talking about strategic planning here, so we're trying to find ways to make it a little lighter and memorable. But the basic idea is that those 4 elements serve a backbone for an ongoing process. If you're familiar with Edward Deming, he's the father of total quality management, said that if you can't describe what you're doing as a process or a system, you don't know what you're doing. So that's the whole intention behind this concept here, is that you're putting a process in place to support your strategic planning. Looking at this a little differently over the course of a year, you can think of, this might be a little harder for you to read on your screen there, but over the course of a year, think of the champion role as someone that's leading, catalyzing, managing the overall strategic planning process indefinitely, that you set some time aside for some form of an organizational assessment and plan creation, and then over the course of the year, you're having some level of check-ins and follow-through to execute, and then you repeat the timeline. Now, this is a sample, so you may have a different timeline, but the concept is how can you take your process, your method, whether it's the CAPE method or something else, and set it up so that you as an organization approach strategic planning as a process and not an event. So that's the basic idea here. So up here, this is sort of the spirit of a champion leading the effort, the leadership piece, and then having the mindset that this is a process that's going on indefinitely. It's not a one-time event. Those 2 pieces here now we're starting to set a foundation for how you can really find some success at strategic planning that then can start to transform the organization over time. Third secret is creating a simple plan. So I'm going to give an example of a not a simple plan. So this is a screenshot of the cover of a plan that I came across many years ago for a small nonprofit. It's 42 pages long, it contains 13 strategies, over 70 people involved in it. This is the kicker. This was for an organization with a budget of less than 25K and one part-time staff member. It's a really lovely document, actually. It's beautiful. It's got really cool photos. Tremendously passionate people came together to create this, and with the best intentions. Really, most definitely the best intentions. The challenge is that it's so large that it's difficult for people to make decisions and try to implement this. And when you look at the results, this organization hasn't really grown in any significant way in the last 10 years since the plan was created back in 2009. So bigger is not necessarily better in the strategic planning realm, especially for a small organization. Apply this to a large municipality or some other large institution with a capacity of multiple people that could do this, then this strategic plan may then start to be the right fit. But certainly for a small organization, it's overkill, and you have so many things on their plate that it's hard to decide what to do. So here's the flips. Here's the opposite side of the coin, which is an example. It's a little long, but it's illustrative. I'm going to read this to you. So this is a friend of mine, James Holland, and he wasn't my friend until I read this from him. So he said, one of the very best plans I've ever seen in the nonprofit sector was just 2 pages. At the top of page 1 was a brief statement that basically said, we are doing a very good job, and we believe that these 3 things will make this organization even better. We believe they are 3 things we can accomplish next year. Below that were 3 goals for the coming year with the names of staff and board members in charge of accomplishing those goals. A very rough timeline for each and a goal number for success. The second page listed 2 additional goals for the following year with staff and board members assigned to each, with the understanding that there were B list items. It would be nice to accomplish them, but not mandatory. The plan could have actually been collected on 1 page, but they used 2 for graphic clarity. This national organization had an annual operating budget of more than 10 million, and it consistently received very high satisfaction rating from its members. This is the spirit. What James, so I read this in this article, and I called James up. This was many years ago, and I introduced myself, and I said, I love what you wrote, and we were kindred spirits about how to create simple plans for the effectiveness of your organization. And this is the spirit of what we're talking about in terms of simplicity, trying to create a simple and focused plan for your organization. I'm looking at the poll numbers here from what you all took before. Well, I'll come up with that in just a minute, the Michael Porter quote. But the concept here is keeping things simple and keeping things super focused. Now, I'll share with you our strategic plan framework. I saw in the quote here, or in the polls, that some of you were unsure about how to create a strategic plan. So perhaps this slide will be of help to you. With this concept that we want to put pieces in place to help you execute it, and the simpler the plan, the more likely you're going to be able to use it and manage it. We've created a 2-part strategic planning framework. So part 1 is what we call our compass, and part 2 is called our actions. There's only 2 parts. You can collect this on 1 page very easily for a small organization. Some of our clients use multiple pages, but it's very doable on 1 page. The compass section provides direction. So just like a compass, and within the compass lives these types of things that give you all your overall direction: your mission, your vision statement, the organizational values, key metrics. What I tell all my clients, especially the smaller ones that are starting out, if you have to pick one of these to lean on first, go with your mission. If you don't have a clear mission, people aren't sure about it, focus on that first. Your mission statement, 1 sentence, what you do and for whom. I would then say your vision, probably your next piece here. The vision and the mission live together, where the mission is, what you're doing for whom, and the vision is what's going to happen as a result of the success of your organization. Then if you're rolling with those, then you can tackle the values and some key metrics over time. I mean, metrics in the nonprofit space, as you all know, is becoming more and more prevalent. But if you're on the front end of this, then absolutely making sure you're dialed in on your mission and then going forth. But in any event, and you could add some different things in here too. Some people put their taglines or overall strategic themes, whatever. These are the types of things that give you all overall direction. And so that's the part 1 of your strategic plan, section 1. Section 2, our actions, describe the actions, the stuff that you all are going to do that takes you in the direction that the compass provides. In our model, we use strategic areas, which are essentially buckets of content that you focus on in the organization. So a strategic area might be fundraising, a strategic area might be board development, a strategic area might be financial management, a strategic area might be measuring impact, a strategic area might be financial, or might be facility improvement. It's just something that you as an organization thematically are working on to do. And then within that strategic area, you identify some key goals, and then you break the key goals up into action items. And so the action items support the goals, and the goals then reinforce to support the strategic areas. So if this framework works for you, fantastic. It's very simple. It's easy to track. On the next slide, I show you what that can look like on one page. So we actually, in our business, we've created software for our clients to track, to document and track their plans. So that two-part plan that I just referenced, the compass and the actions, this is reflected in this slide here. So the compass here has a vision, mission, values, some metrics here at the top. Section 1, Section 2 are actions. This is a very simple plan for a very small organization, but you gotta love the focus of it. And the concept here is simplicity, focus. Note here, there's some colors that are listed. I'll talk a little bit more about that over time, but the concept is that you all need to measure your progress on your plan over time, have due dates and people assigned to the different goals. This is sort of the mechanics of the goals themselves. But in any event, keeping this very simple in this process hopefully provides you with a template for how you could go forward with your plan. A simple plan that you all would actually use. I have some quotes around simplicity that I like to share. This is something I came up with years ago. Simplicity catalyzes execution. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Da Vinci said that, and Steve Jobs used to use that all the time at Apple. And this is Michael Porter. So the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. The essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. Now, I'm not talking a whole lot about strategy per se as much as the strategic planning process, but I think it's interesting that in the poll, 9% chose that as the response. It was the second response on the poll, and 82% responded by saying Michael Porter said how to get there was the third element. So the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. Just a little bit of a conversation piece on what you should or could have in your strategic plan is this concept of focus. What I've found over the years is those organizations, those small organizations that are super focused, have a very narrow lane on doing something over and over again. One thing really, really well are the organizations that succeed the most effectively. It's very simple. When Henry Ford started Ford years, over 100 years ago, he said, "I'll build you any type of car as long as it's a black Model T." So that was super focused. When McDonald's started, you can go in there and get anything to eat as long as a hamburger and fries and a Coke. It's like super focused. So this concept of choosing what not to do is a strategic lens that can apply to your overall strategic plan. So in any event, that's a little bit of a side note here around the quality of your strategic plan. I'm going to get back to the tips here and the secrets. So we talked about the importance of the leadership, the importance of your never-ending process, creating a simple plan. The fourth item here is building shared ownership. So if your team, there's a phrase that a colleague of mine taught me years ago, says people support that which they create. So if you get your team involved in there, they'll support it. And this doesn't come as any news to you, I'm sure. Here's a graphic that I like to share sometimes around this. So if this outline represents your organization and you have all these individual team members, some members going this way, some going that way, some people aligned with the organization, what you fantasize about is everyone going in the same direction, they're on the same page and so on. And the concept here is that closing this gap, getting people aligned is going to save you all time and money. So how do you do that? How do you get people to be engaged in this overall direction? Well, from the very beginning, communicating to the organization that we're all committed to this ongoing process. On the front end of the process, engaging with your board and staff in the assessment. So surveys for stakeholders, surveys for staff members, interviews with staff members, trying to get some feedback from them in some sort of assessment process that gives you the data you need to create the best plan you can. A retreat. Many organizations go on a strategic planning retreat to engage their staff and board more effectively. Engage as many people in that process as you financially can handle it and is realistic, but the more that the more you spread that around your team at a retreat, especially for staff and board to be there at the same time, it creates stronger relationships across the staff and board too. But getting them involved there, making sure that once the plan is created, that everyone has a documented role and you have some level of follow-up and measuring progress on the goals and the things that they're doing. And if people have individual performance plans at the organization, lean that individual performance plan or their goals up against a strategic plan and see if there's some level of overlap you can make. But these are the types of things that if you get them involved, then they're going to be much more likely to get on the same page, and you're going to close this gap because everyone's engaged in the organization. So that's the fourth basic secret or tip. And then the fifth item, pretty straightforward concept, and there's one particular nuance to this that I'm going to share with you in a moment around writing powerful goals. So elements of powerful goals, this is going to be very familiar to many of you here. You know, making goals specific, measurable, time-bound, making sure there's a person responsible, and it's broken down into a set of key action steps. That's sort of goal writing 101. A lot of you may be real familiar with that, but oftentimes, even though we've seen goal writing 101, people don't follow those rules, and they set poor goals, such as, here's my goal to raise money or to grow the board. Stronger goals are a little more specific, they're a little more time-bound, growing the board to 7 members, that sort of thing. And then, of course, you want to make sure that, you know, these types of goals have people's names assigned to them, due dates, etc. So I'm not spending much time on this slide because this is sort of goal writing 101 that many of you are probably familiar with. But here's a couple of nuances that I've found over the years that really help you with the execution of the goal and the creation of the goal. After you've written a goal, you and your team have written a goal, take a few minutes and write down a list of all the barriers to achieving that goal. This list then becomes the raw material for identifying action items to overcome these barriers. This activity alone has been probably the most fundamental and biggest lever I've found for my clients to actually achieve the goals. So for example, here's a barrier. Maybe you all say you have a goal and it's hard to fit this goal into our existing schedule. You're so busy. So you've identified that barrier in the front end. So one of your action items to achieve the goal is to calendar a set of brief meetings where we can commit to focusing on this goal. Similarly, this barrier here, the board may not approve of this. So what's our action item that we're gonna have? You know, introduce the board to this issue and get their buy-in and edits up front. So this sort of oppositional thinking is the way the brain works. You identify a goal and then your brain starts to say, well, here are the problems that we have to do that. So leverage those, identify those, write those barriers down, and then flip them on their head. And then so these barriers become the raw material for you all to actually achieve them. And so this is a really fundamental and powerful tool you can use to actually help you to accomplish the goals themselves once they've been written. One other, and this is my last point, is something I learned several years ago just in my own experience, but then I found some research that backs this up, is a concept of using process goals. So what I have found over the years is that there's two basic buckets of goals. There's results goals, raise 150K by X time, or a process goal, document our ongoing fundraising plan and system, for example. Both of these are specific, both of those are measurable, right? Both of those can be time bound. You can assign someone to them. So both these are totally reasonable goals. They're just a little different that this one doesn't have a number, and we often think we have to have a results goal. It has to have a number affiliated with that. What I've found over time is that a lot of my small organizations that we work with don't have a very good set of processes in place. So if they start setting these goals, they don't have the processes in place to actually achieve them and to hit those goals over time. And so they're running around trying to get this results goal done, but they don't have the mechanics or the pieces within their organization to support it. So I say, let's establish some process types of goals here. And what I found happened, I was finding that my clients are getting a lot of good benefit from that, but then I found some research that showed that this research was studying a whole body of corporations. And they were trying to find out what was leading to the success of some organizations versus others. Well, their first question was, well, do you all as an organization have goals? Well, everybody had goals. That wasn't the issue. The high success organizations had goals. The low success organizations had goals. That wasn't the issue. What they found by a factor of 3 to 1 is that those companies that had process-based goals were 3 times more successful than these. In other words, they were paying attention to the processes that they had to put in place. Those not too sexy and not too interesting processes that take time to put into place so you can raise the 150 or do whatever. Those processes, if they focused on that, that then gave them the ability to really hit their metrics over time. So this is an interesting nuance to the goal writing process that I've found over the years that you don't hear very often, but hopefully this is truly a secret that really can help you in your goal writing process. So those are the 5 secrets and tips that I wanted to share as part of this, these 5 here. So I am going to turn this over to, if I can, I don't know if Elizabeth, you can take the screen back.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I just want to say on behalf of the SBDC, the CSUB SBDC, we really enjoy the simplicity of your software and how it helps keep us all on the same page.
Sweet.
So oops, there we go. Getting it back.
Okay, there you go.
Wonderful. So we had a few questions and just wanted to go over. So how do you measure progress on goals?
Great, good question. So there's different ways to do this. Something, let's say you have the goal, the one I used in the presentation, raise 150K in 2018. How do you measure progress on that? We use what's commonly referred to as a traffic light process. And so the traffic light is red. Well, let me back up. You need to have a due date. So make sure that there's a due date for that goal. So in this case, this would be raise 150K by December 31. So the colors would be red. We are off track and are not going to hit that goal by the due date. Yellow, so again, this is a traffic light. Yellow, we have slow progress and we may or may not hit that, but it sort of shines a cautionary light on that. Green is we're doing well. We're in all likelihood going to hit the goal. And then blue is we've achieved the goal. So it's this traffic light with the addition of blue showing that you have achieved it. That's the simplest way that I've found most of my clients like to measure progress over time. And in fact, in the slide that I shared earlier with the plan, you saw some colors on there and that referenced that. Some of my clients would like to focus on the metrics a little bit more, saying we're 65% of the way there, 75% of the way there. I'm in favor of that if that is something that resonates for them. But at a minimum, absolute minimum, the color-based process provides some level of accountability and support. And when you get together with your team members and you start to report on that, then those colors kind of catch people's eyes around whether we're doing well or not doing well on the particular goals. And I don't know, Kelly, if you have anything you want to add to that, because you've experienced that in the process, for several years now. And maybe he's muted.
I was muted, but yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And the process is such a great process. And it comes back again to executing, in my point, and really having Elizabeth and having the team together and really go through the process is really so valuable. At the end of it, it's just a great process.
Oh,
the next question, or let me throw a question in, Eric, while I'm on,
okay.
Is we have some for-profit businesses out there.
Yeah.
So how different would the strategic planning process be for a small for-profit business as compared to a nonprofit?
Conceptually, it's the same thing. I would, if I go back to the slides, you want to think as a for-profit person about how we are going to execute this. You want to think that how are we going to put this process in place at our small business over time? So conceptually, that's still the same. How am I going to make this a part of my job so that I don't get distracted by all the different things that are falling on my plate as a leader of a small business? So those types of things are the same. Are we going to measure progress, et cetera? So, we're going to write good goals. Where it tends to be different is I frankly think strategic planning at a small nonprofit is more challenging because of the nature of having multiple check-ins and sort of oversight. You have a board of directors that you have to pass this by. Certainly at a corporation, you're going to have a board of directors, but most small businesses, that's a lot more agile than having maybe 12 members of your board that are looking at this and thinking of it. So that sort of clogs the pipe a little bit. It ultimately, ideally makes the plan a little better over time, but that level of engagement at a nonprofit where you're getting the board involved, typically the spirit of the nonprofit is a little bit more participatory across the organization, a little more horizontally integrated versus up and down. So when you look at strategic planning books that are written for businesses, it's usually written for the business owner to go off on a weekend with his or her business partner, create a plan, come back and get going. Here's the plan, guys, let's roll. Whereas a nonprofit is a much more participatory piece, which frankly makes it a little more challenging, I think. So that's a short answer to that, Kelly. There's other pieces, but that's one thing for sure.
Oh, wonderful. So we have a couple more questions that came in. One of our participants, our viewers, wanted to know if you could expand on the organizational metric.
Yes.
And the process goal.
Yeah, the organizational metrics. Okay, let me see if I can. What I'm guessing the question is, well, there's probably two things. Okay, can I share my screen again?
Absolutely.
I'll do this. So I don't know if this is what was being referenced, but possibly here, and there's two ways I can answer this. So this key metrics piece that's on this slide, so this person that asked this question is probably within the nonprofit space having to respond to funders and board members about, so how do we know when we're successful? What are those key metrics that we are trying to hit? And this is a really challenging thing in the nonprofit space. There's typically output and outcome types of metrics. So an output might be we serve 750 students. That's an output. Fairly easy to measure. Our customers are receiving, rating us at 90% customer satisfaction. Pretty easy to measure. But the outcome, the actual impact that we as an organization are having on our community or on those students becomes much more difficult. So becomes much more difficult to measure. So let's say that you're an organization that's a literacy organization. You serve 750 students, but are we really impacting their lifelong effort of literacy? And so you have to track over time. Is it decreasing the illiteracy rate within our community? Small nonprofits struggle to have the capacity to measure some of those outputs as good as they, some of those outcomes as well as they might want to. But nonetheless, be thinking about strategically what's the ultimate outcome that we want to have as a result of hitting our mission, and then measuring those outputs along the way is a part of that. And I think there's possibly another component of that question, and it's probably, if I'm not mistaken, Elizabeth, you can steer me correctly. It might have been around this slide here, around the goals. Which was actually, no, this one here, process goals, this piece here.
Yes.
Yeah. So, say the question again on that one, Elizabeth, around this.
They were wanting to know if you could expand on the process goal and provide an example of a process goal.
Okay. All right. I misunderstood you a little bit there. So the process goal is, so here's one. This is a process. Document our ongoing plan and system. So that is a process, and it's not a specific result. Of course, there's a result that you could hand over a plan at the end. Another process goal could be to document and create our operations manual. Another process might be to document and implement our process for recruiting and strengthening our board. All of those are processes that are not necessarily a specific result, like 7 board members or that sort of thing. And that's what the point of this is so often people focus just on the number as a result, and the data, my experience, everything shows that when you have those process goals in place, that actually catalyzes the effectiveness of your organization to a much greater degree than simply saying this results goal. Once you have that fundraising plan and process in place and it's rolling and it's cooking, then with that, then you can maybe start to focus more on the results goal, has been my experience, and then nail that one.
Oh, wonderful.
Anything else, Elizabeth?
We do have another question that is pertaining to working with a board that's primarily made up of family members. Have you encountered any challenges with family boards?
Absolutely.
So what's the best way to work with?
Well, that would be a week-long consulting engagement.
Gotcha.
It's just like our own families. I have worked with family-run organizations. There are consultants that specialize specifically on working with it because it's tricky, and that's the nature of the question.
Okay. Well,
I'll just say that with families or people that, frankly, I could say the same thing with founders too, and people that have been a part of the organization for a long time. Getting as many things as possible documented and clarified, and having the mechanics of that team and the principle and the muscle of that team documenting, so that everyone's make sure we're on the same page around things. Because what often happens is things are assumed, and unless you have the ability to have that documentation and reflect on it, and it's sort of it's sort of a fundamental thing for any organization, but it becomes especially important when you have the nuances of the family engaged. And again, this also goes with founders too. It's not a very sufficient answer because we only have a couple of minutes left here, but that sort of fundamental piece I have found goes a long way to making sure that those lines of communication are clear and people are understanding. And then if they're not clear, then you have the basis of being able to work on it because it's right there written down for everybody.
Awesome. Well, do you have time for one more question, or would you like?
I'm fine. If you, yeah, I think we got 4 minutes. Whatever you want, Elizabeth.
All right. So let me go back here. And so, what are some of the typical elements of an organizational assessment?
Got it. So let me go back to my screen here, and if I can.
Sure.
Let's see here. So within the CAPE method, let's see here, I'm not able to do that just right now. So within the CAPE method, that cycle that I shared with you, so there were 4 parts: CAPE, champion, assess, plan, and execute. So step 2 was assess. Typically what we do in an organizational assessment is we will, and this is something you can do in your own organization, is we look at existing documents, budgets for the next year, past budgets, any fundraising plans, so the financial analysis. We look at past strategic plans if they exist. So we look at some key strategic documents. We partner that with any sort of measurement that we have, any sort of numbers that we're getting on in terms of our impact. So that's another data point. We will do interviews with staff members, interviews with board members, do some surveying, do something called a SWOT analysis. It's a very common old as dirt tool for getting strategic impact input from people. SWOT standing for strengths, weaknesses is W, O opportunities, T is threats. That sort of analysis, it's a real simple but effective process that you can get that feedback from. Sometimes we reach out to stakeholders and key stakeholders. But anyhow, you as a leader are pulling these different assessment pieces into place, and then you, through the analysis process, so then sort of try to find the themes that then lead to what you need to document as part of your plan. So it's a mix of looking at documents, it's a mix of interviews, it's a mix of looking at data, it's a mix of looking, doing some surveying, online surveying, and doing it as simply as you possibly can for your own organization, realizing the capacity you have. What I just listed is stuff that I do as a consultant. You may have to do only 1 or 2 of those because you just don't have the capacity to do all of those things.
Thank you so much. Well, it looks like we're about out of time. We do have a few unanswered questions, and so we will get back to you via email and get you some some answers on that. And I just want to say again, thank you for the wonderful presentation, Mr. Ryan. And we are so appreciative of your tips on keeping a simple and focused strategic plan for our small nonprofits, and hope to keep us on track.
Thanks a lot. It's fun. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have any more questions, please respond to our survey, and you can leave some questions in there, or you can get in contact with Mr. Ryan. I know he had a closing slide that we didn't quite get to, but we'll be sure to send out that information at the end. And for the CSUB SBDC, I'm Elizabeth Hamlin. I want to say thank you, Mr. Ryan, and thank you, Kelly Bearden, for allowing us to do this awesome webinar.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you. All right. And